Memorial Day, a time for remembrance and honor. But for one small town in upstate New York, it became a day of horror and mystery that they would never forget. Every year, the residents of Pineville gather for a Memorial Day celebration, a day filled with parades, barbecues, and fireworks. This year, however, was different. It began with an unexpected discovery, one that would unravel a series of chilling events. Pineville was a picturesque town, the kind you might find on a postcard. Surrounded by dense forests and serene lakes, it was a place where everyone knew each other. But behind its charming facade, Pineville held a dark secret. The story begins with Jack Thompson, a retired Army veteran and a respected member of the community. Jack had always been the one to lead the Memorial Day parade, but this year, something strange happened. A construction crew working on the outskirts of town unearthed an old weathered box buried deep underground. Inside was a diary, its pages yellowed with age and filled with entries from a long-forgotten era. To whomever finds this, know that Pineville was built on blood and betrayal. Our hands are stained, and the truth must be known. E.C. 1823. Jack was puzzled. The entries spoke of a brutal conflict between the early settlers and the Native American tribes who originally inhabited the land. Despite the strange message, his curiosity got the better of him. That night, Jack took the diary to Samuel Harris, the town's unofficial historian. Samuel revealed that he had long suspected there was more to Pineville's history than the town's official records suggested. Together, they pored over the diary, uncovering a chilling account of a massacre orchestrated by the settlers. The townspeople had covered up the atrocity, and the descendants of the victims had lived in ignorance of their ancestors' fate. "Jack, we need to bring this to light," Samuel urged. "The truth must be acknowledged, no matter the cost." Jack was skeptical, but Samuel's conviction was unshakable. They decided to dig deeper into the town's archives, hoping to find corroborating evidence. Over the next few days, Jack and Samuel uncovered old documents and diaries that matched the entries in the discovered diary. They found letters, maps, and reports that detailed the massacre in gruesome detail. Armed with this knowledge, they approached the town council, urging them to publicly acknowledge the town's dark history. The council was reluctant, fearing the repercussions. But strange things began to happen in Pineville. The old chapel, long abandoned, became a focal point of unexplained disturbances. The construction crew reported seeing shadows and hearing whispers. Fear and paranoia began to spread among the townspeople. Despite the mounting tension, Jack and Samuel pressed on. They organized a town meeting, presenting their findings to the community. The evidence was irrefutable, and the weight of the town's collective guilt became impossible to ignore. On Memorial Day, instead of the usual festivities, the town held a solemn ceremony at the old chapel. Jack read aloud the settlers' account, and Samuel shared the historical context of the events. They invited representatives from the nearby Native American tribe to participate, fostering a sense of reconciliation and healing. As the ceremony concluded, a hush fell over the crowd. The air felt lighter, and for the first time in years, Pineville was at peace. The events of that Memorial Day changed Pineville forever. The town had confronted its past, and in doing so, had laid the foundation for a more honest and inclusive future. Jack and Samuel became local heroes, their names forever etched into the town's history. And every year on Memorial Day, the residents of Pineville gather not just to honor their veterans, but to remember the truth that had set them free. Sometimes the past refuses to stay buried, and when it surfaces, it demands to be acknowledged. Pineville learned this lesson the hard way. This Memorial Day, as you honor the fallen, remember that some stories still wait to be told. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more gripping tales. Until next time, stay safe, and remember, the most haunting stories are often the ones grounded in reality.
Memorial Day in the small town of Pineville was always a time of remembrance and celebration. The community came together to honor their fallen heroes with parades, barbecues, and fireworks. But this year, something unexpected happened that would change the town forever. It all started with a group of friends who had known each other since high school: Jack, Sarah, Tom, and Emily. They decided to spend Memorial Day weekend camping in the nearby pine forest, a place they had often explored as kids. The forest was vast and dense, full of hidden trails and rich history. But one event in its history stood out above the rest. the story of the Lost Patrol. Back in the early 1940s, a group of soldiers from Pineville went missing during a training exercise in the forest. Despite extensive searches, they were never found, and over the years, their story became a local legend. People claimed to hear strange noises in the forest, and some even said they saw ghostly figures among the trees. But Jack and his friends were skeptical. They were there for an adventure, not ghost stories. As they set up camp, the group reminisced about their childhood and shared laughter around the fire. The night was clear, and the stars were bright. But as the hours passed, the mood began to shift. Strange noises echoed through the trees, branches snapping, leaves rustling. At first, they dismissed it as animals, but the sounds grew louder and more deliberate. Suddenly, Tom stood up. "Did you hear that?" he asked, his voice tense. The others listened closely. In the distance, they heard what sounded like faint voices. Jack grabbed a flashlight and shone it into the darkness, but there was nothing there. "It's probably just the wind," Sarah said, trying to reassure everyone. But the unease lingered. As the night went on, the voices grew closer, and a sense of dread settled over the group. They decided to turn in for the night, hoping that sleep would bring relief. But sleep was elusive. Jack lay in his tent, staring at the ceiling, when he heard a distinct voice whispering his name. He bolted upright and looked around. The whisper came again, closer this time. Heart pounding, he unzipped his tent and stepped outside. The forest was eerily silent, but he could feel eyes watching him. He walked over to Tom's tent and shook him awake. "I heard something," Jack whispered. Tom groggily sat up, but before he could respond, a blood-curdling scream pierced the night. It was Emily. The group rushed to Emily's tent, where she was sitting up, shaking and pale. "I saw someone," she stammered. "A man in an old military uniform. He was standing right there, watching us." Jack tried to calm her down, but he could see the fear in her eyes. He knew something was wrong. The group decided to pack up and leave immediately, but as they gathered their things, they noticed something chilling. Footprints, fresh and deep, circled their campsite. They were not alone. Panicked, they started down the trail, but the forest seemed to close in around them. The voices grew louder, more urgent. They quickened their pace, but no matter how fast they ran, the voices followed. Finally, they burst out of the forest and into the open field where their car was parked. Gasping for breath, they piled in and sped away, not daring to look back. When they reached town, they went straight to the local sheriff's office, desperate to explain what had happened. Sheriff Harris, a grizzled veteran who had lived in Pineville his whole life, listened intently. When they finished, he nodded solemnly. "You're not the first to experience this," he said. "There's been a lot of history in that forest. During the war, there were training accidents and some men never made it out. But there's always been rational explanations, wildlife, echoes, even pranksters." Jack and his friends were shaken but determined to find a logical explanation. With the sheriff's guidance, they researched the patrol's last known whereabouts and organized a proper memorial in the forest. They placed a plaque at the site where the soldiers were last seen and held a solemn ceremony to honor their memory. As they stood there, the air felt lighter, and the forest seemed to exhale a sigh of relief. The voices were gone, replaced by a peaceful silence. The town of Pineville had finally acknowledged its forgotten heroes, and in doing so, had laid their stories to rest. From that day forward, every Memorial Day, the town gathered at the memorial site in the forest to honor not only their fallen soldiers but also those who had been forgotten. Jack, Sarah, Tom, and Emily never forgot that fateful night and the lesson they learned. That some stories demand to be heard, and that history, no matter how hidden, must be remembered.